You're sitting in your kitchen and your phone dies. For exactly 3 seconds, you feel panic. Not because you can't call someone, but because you've forgotten how to exist without a screen. Then something clicks. You remember spending entire weekends where nobody could find you. No texts, no notifications, just gone. And for one brief moment, you feel something dangerous. Relief. You are a Xennial, born roughly between 1977 and 1985, and you're the last humans who will ever remember what it felt like to be private. But nobody knows what to call you. Too cynical for Millennials, too digital for X. You don't fit. You're chronologically exhausted, a term researchers now use to describe people who've lived through two completely different technological eras in one lifetime. You learned to type on actual typewriters, and then on smartphones. You recorded songs off the radio with your finger on the stop button. You memorized phone numbers because you had to. And now you panic when your GPS glitches for 10 seconds even though you grew up reading paper maps. Here's what the research shows. Your brain's foundational wiring happened between ages 12 and 22. That's when your prefrontal cortex solidified its model of the world works. For most generations, that window is consistent. One technology, one social system, one type of communication. But for Xennials, that critical developmental window was split in half. The first half was analog, libraries, landlines, waiting. The second half was digital, instant messaging, search engines, immediacy. Your brain built two contradictory operating systems, and you've been running both simultaneously for 20 years. Neuropsychologists call this cognitive load, the mental effort required to process information. But you're not just processing information, you're constantly translating between two incompatible realities. When your GPS fails, you don't just feel annoyed, you feel cognitive whiplash as your brain switches from digital dependency to analog problem solving. You can use a paper map, you just haven't access to that neural pathway in years, and the switch takes effort. But here's the reframe. You're not confused, you're bilingual. Boomers speak only analog. Gen Z speaks only digital. You speak both. That's not a deficit, that's a rare form of fluency. You can read body language and detect fake social media authenticity. You can focus deeply for hours and process rapid information streams. You troubleshoot instinctively. When the Wi-Fi drops, Gen Z panics and boomers give up. You check the router. You were raised as latchkey kids with minimal supervision, which created what psychologists call an internal locus of control. You don't wait for permission or help. You solve problems yourself. And if you're a Black Xennial male, this operates on a second axis. You're not just navigating analog versus digital, you're navigating authenticity versus performance in a culture that has spent your entire life labeling you. Dangerous, irresponsible, hypersexual, uneducated. From childhood, you learned to filter everything for what was genuine versus what was coded disrespect. Your skepticism isn't negativity, it's pattern recognition. You developed what researchers describe as a relational cognitive style. You don't just analyze information in isolation, you cross-reference it through collective impact. You ask, is this true for us? Does this uplift or extract? You see individual events as symptoms of systemic patterns. A personal win only matters if it benefits the community. A personal wound is evidence of a larger battle. This makes you exceptionally good at detecting inauthenticity. Studies on Black Millennial and Xennial marketing preferences confirm this. You require raw, unfiltered, tangible proof. You have zero tolerance for performance. But when you find authenticity, you're intensely loyal. This isn't cynicism, this is calibrated trust. You've had to distinguish between people who saw you as fully human and people performing tolerance your entire life. But here's where the cost shows up. And it's not abstract, it's in the mortality data. Deaths of despair, suicide, drug overdose, alcohol-related liver disease are spiking in Xennials entering middle age. This trend cuts across race, education, and geography. It's not random. You were the generation that graduated into the 2008 financial collapse. You were promised that education and effort would create stability. Instead, you got student debt, gig economy instability, and the destruction of the social contract in real time. A 2019 study found that Xennial and Millennial men specifically report higher workplace anxiety about being unnoticed in remote settings, leading to chronic overwork to prove value. Your financial caution isn't paranoia, it's learned pragmatism. You watched the system fail. You know it can fail again. And now you're caught in a second bind. Your nervous system craves analog sanctuary, but the modern economy demands constant digital presence. You feel surveillance fatigue. You understand the value of an unrecorded life, but you're forced to exist on platforms that monetize visibility. Younger generations overshare because they've never known privacy. Older generations ignore the internet. You live in the gap. You know what you've lost, but you can't opt out. So, here's the diagnostic. When you're stressed, do you feel a physical need to touch something real? To cook, garden, fix something with your hands? That's not nostalgia. That's your parasympathetic nervous system trying to regulate through tactile grounding, a biological reset your body learned before screens taught you to soothe with scrolling. You're physiologically wired for a world that no longer exists. But that same wiring gives you something nobody else has: tolerance for void. You have what I call dial-up patience. You can sit with boredom, silence, and waiting without anxiety spiraling because you were conditioned to wait for modems to connect, for songs to play on the radio, for people to call you back on landlines. Gen Z reports higher rates of anxiety when forced into unstimulated waiting. You were built for it. That's a psychological resilience that's becoming extinct. And here's the paradox. You're simultaneously secure and avoidant. Secure in your ability to function offline and solve problems independently, avoidant of digital enmeshment and hypersurveillance. Traditional attachment theory doesn't account for people raised during a technological rupture. You value connection, but protect autonomy. You're loyal when you find authenticity, but you have zero tolerance for performance. If you're a Black Xennial male, this manifests as something more specific, a drive for self-definition. You reject externally imposed narratives, not with rage, but with precision. You define yourself as a survivor, a bridge, a conqueror. You've watched peers face health crises, systemic violence, economic collapse. You know time is finite. You filter ruthlessly what's mandatory and what's noise. You only engage with what's essential. Your outsider status isn't a flaw, it's refusal. Refusal to accept scripts you didn't write. You are the generation that will never fit neatly into categories because you were shaped by a transformation that will never happen again in human history. You are translators between two worlds, the only ones who remember what it felt like to be unreachable, to be bored, to exist without an audience. If you spent years feeling like you don't belong to Gen X or Millennials, if you feel chronologically exhausted, if you crave analog stillness while drowning in digital noise, you're not broken, you're a bridge, and the world needs you precisely because you don't fit the algorithm. But here's the question. Are you using your bilingualism to translate or to hide? Because the same privacy that protects you can isolate you. The same pattern recognition that detects threats can prevent intimacy. The same self-sufficiency that made you resilient can make you unreachable. You're fluent in two worlds, but are you fully present in either? Because until you answer that, you'll stay in the gap, translating for everyone else, but never feeling at home yourself. And that's exactly what we're unpacking in the next video.